Cool. All right. Thanks everybody for coming tonight to Running for Office from a Planning Perspective. First off, I have to ask, how many people in this room are Penn Design students? Yeah, all right, most of you. How many of you know Samantha personally? Good. Way to come out and support your lady. I'm Helen Horseman Allen. I'm a board member at 2 local organizations devoted to supporting women running for office. Represent PA is a PAC funding women running for the Pennsylvania State Legislature, and Emerge Pennsylvania is the Pennsylvania branch of a nationwide candidate training program for women. We train women to run for office and win. I'm very pleased to be sharing the stage tonight with 3 very impressive Penn Design grads, one of whom is also an Emerge grad, here to share their experiences of running for elected office. I'll start with Jamie. Jamie Gauthier is the Democratic candidate and presumptive future councilwoman representing Philadelphia's 3rd district. Prior to running for office, Jamie served her West Philadelphia community building sustainable businesses and community reinvestment, and most recently served as the executive director for the Fairmount Park Conservancy. Thanks for being here, Jamie.
Thank you for having me.
Manisha Bewtra currently serves as a city councilor at large in Melrose, Massachusetts, where she also ran for mayor this year. Manisha's work prior to city council focused on housing, data analytics, and other planning issues. Thanks for being here, Manisha. And then Samantha Whitfield, maybe known to some of you, graduated last year, so don't think you're too far away from maybe this moment yourself. She's currently running for the Willingboro, New Jersey Township Council, where she is also the presumptive city councilor, and runs her own business, SAS Society. Thanks for being here, Samantha.
Thank you.
All right, let's start with a question for all 3 of you. What drew you to planning?
I stumbled upon planning. I had come out of undergrad with an accounting degree, and I went to work for DuPont as a sales and use tax accountant, and maybe 2 years in, I figured out that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to do something that helped people, and that wasn't just squarely focused on profit. And so I literally began to look at different courses of discipline at all of the local universities, and I came across the field of city planning, and it spoke to so many things that I was interested in, like design, like helping community members to shape their neighborhoods, like helping the city to be a better place. I wound up taking a couple courses at Temple just to see if I would like it. And I did, and so wound up enrolling full-time at Penn Design, which I think was like the School of Fine Arts at that time.
Right. How about you, Manisha?
Sure. So I similarly stumbled upon planning. I got my undergraduate degree. I did a double major in economics and art at the University of Iowa. I grew up in Iowa, and I was a resident assistant in the dorms, and one of my jobs was putting up flyers on our bulletin board, which I was really terrible at. But one of the flyers benefited me because it was an advertisement for the University of Iowa's program in urban planning. And it said, "Are you interested in?" And it was this laundry list of topics like history, economics, geography, communities. I don't remember what was on the list, but I was like, yes, I am. I am interested in all these things, and I've always struggled with just being such an interdisciplinary person. It was such a challenge going from like high school to college, where you are so expensive in high school, and then you have to narrow and focus into a field. And it was like this aha moment where I'm like, ooh, this might be the field for me, because everybody was like, what are you going to do with economics and art? Are you going to open an art gallery? And I'm like, that's not what economics is. It doesn't teach you any business skills. So anyway, long story short, I sort of like, that was my first intro to the field, and I started learning more about it. I knew I was still like a little hesitant when I was applying to graduate schools, like, is this the right thing for me? But honestly, through the application process and having to like be forced to articulate myself with a statement of why I want to go to any school, it really helped me hone in on, yes, this is the right thing. And then I came here and found out that, yes, indeed, planning was the right package for me.
I would say my experience is kind of similar. I stumbled on planning. So I have a community organizing background, and I was I still am president of the local NAACP. So being involved in the community, going to council meetings, being involved on different boards and commissions, it started to pique my interest, but I was spending a lot of time there. And a mentor of mine said, "You're volunteering a lot. You know this is someone's job." And I did not know that it was someone's job. So she said, "Yeah, like people do this for a living." So I started to look at programs, and of course, it was really, really close to the application deadline. So I had 2 weeks to get my application together. And I picked Penn just out of the blue, just like, this is the school I'm going to apply to. I'm just going to put all my energy into this one application. And the rest is history.
When you started at Penn Design, like what was your dream job? What did you think you were going to walk out of here doing?
When I started here, I focused on housing and community and economic development. So I knew that I wanted to help support more affordable housing and affordable housing policy in Philadelphia. Coming out, I also knew I wanted to work for LISC. I don't know how many folks, Local Initiative Support Corporation. And I actually got pregnant with my son during my first year, so I wasn't able to do my internship because I was having a baby. And so I didn't have the same opportunity to do an internship and kind of find a job that way, but I focused in on LISC. I thought it was just an incredibly interesting organization that would allow me to learn about community and economic development, and so I just like stalked them, and I winded up getting a job in New York at their national office, and I commuted every day for a year and a half until I got a job in their Philly office. But ultimately, I worked there for 9.5 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Dream jobs?
I don't remember if I had a specific dream job in mind while I was in school, but one of the things I've been reflecting on a lot today is just how stepping foot on this campus for the first time, when I was considering which school I wanted to go to after I got acceptances in a couple different schools, I remember standing in the middle of, I forget what this is, the Paramount, is this the quadrangle? I don't remember what this area is called, but this area out here, and just stepping and looking around me and feeling so seriously out of my comfort zone. I grew up in the Midwest and in a college town, so I was used to being on a campus, but not used to these older buildings, not used to like the sort of foreboding architecture that was here, and just like having this like, this is where I need to be moment. And I think that's like a kind of a theme that the reason I was reflecting on it today is like running for office is stepping out of your comfort zone too. But then in terms of jobs, I think I was attracted to similar things as Jamie. I was really drawn towards, I mean, I remember being so intrigued and inspired by this whole like dynamic that's here in West Philadelphia with this, town gown or ivory tower and, neighborhood relationship, and what Penn had done positive and that we can also critique in terms of neighborhood relationships. And that, I think, was a real catalyst for me of thinking about how institutions play a role in the surrounding communities, and also just experiencing being, trying to take part in life in West Philadelphia and in Center City while I was here for those 2 years.
When it comes to dream job, I think it started off, so in my personal statement, I actually said, I'm going to be mayor of my town. So that was like my dream, and I don't know how serious I was about it when I wrote that in the personal statement. I think I just wanted to affect change in my town. But now, and as I studied, the dream job shifted, and I really would like to elevate the voices of community members and work in community engagement and help their vision or their needs be addressed in the planning of their towns and where they live.
Awesome. So now, sitting up here on this stage, right, running for office, heading to office, sitting in office, do you look back on any of your coursework, things you did here at Penn, and say, maybe somebody who wasn't me could have guessed that this was in my future?
No.
Can everybody hear Jamie, by the way?
Yeah. Oh, it's my,
Okay.
I wasn't sure my mic was working.
Yeah.
Thank you. I can't speak to any specific course or class that allowed me to see I was going to run for public office, but I don't ever think that that running for office was a leap for me. Coming out of Penn, I've always worked sort of broadly in community and economic development, supporting affordable housing. I led the Sustainable Business Network, the Conservancy. And so to me, I was already in a form of public service. And so it wasn't a big leap to consider going for political office. And I saw running for political office as a way of having a bigger impact than I could in the nonprofit world. Additionally, my father is a lawyer and an activist, and he ran for office a number of times. And so I watched him. So it was always something kind of in the back of my mind, I think.
I don't remember it, again, whether, I mean, I don't know if anybody, like, I would love to have that conversation with my professors and my classmates of like, are you surprised that I did this? But there are things like, again, I mentioned I was a resident assistant in college. I actually was a GA at the Quad, living with freshmen, and that job is so much about sort of building community where you are and having a 24/7 job, which is a lot like running for office. But then also, I think one of my best friends from when I went to school here, one of the stories she would always tell about me was like on our first day, I think it was like that month before school starts, I forget what it's called, pre-matriculation or whatever, where we were doing like some design work and all of that. And I was the dork who went up in front of everyone and was like, hey, let's all go to Reading Terminal Market. We should do this and that. And she was like groaning like, oh, that girl. And we ended up becoming best friends a few days later. And I don't know exactly, that's not exactly about running for office, but there's something about like the role I play in groups and how I don't think of myself that way as a person who gets up in front of everyone and says, let's do this thing, guys. But I kind of am.
There's nothing dorky about wanting to go to Reading Terminal Market.
I mean, that is true. That's my favorite place.
For me, it was kind of just all meshed together. So I don't think it was a surprise to anyone when I ran for office because everyone's kind of saw it coming. And I was running for office while I was still in school. So it just all went together, and there were a few people who foresaw it, even before I came to planning school. And I was like, man, you guys are crazy. I would never run for office. And now I'm here. So, yeah.
You know, so I do have to ask, you know, I've got 3 women on the stage. They say it takes women need to be asked 12 times before they consider running for office. You feel like that was true for you?
Yep.
Is there one person who stands out in your mind when they ask, you're like, okay, maybe this means something?
I was asked a number of times to run for the specific seat that I ran for, but it was also something that I wanted to do, and I wanted it for a long time, and so I think people, you know,
We could see that in you. I can smell it on you.
right, and so when people would come up and kind of ask me to do it, I wouldn't necessarily reveal that I wanted to, but I felt like it was very affirming. What really kind of caused me to actually jump in was feeling like it was the right time, both personally and politically, right? So from a personal perspective, I've been thinking about it for a long time. I just had my 40th birthday, and I was just like, either you are going to do this thing or you are not going to do this thing, right?
Yeah.
And it was hard for me to accept not trying it. Politically, it seemed to me like a time when Philadelphians are really ready for a change, and that's not, you know, that's not the brand of our city, right?
That's not all the time.
Right, and so it seemed that folks were really ready to kind of move some of these longtime folks out of office, and I didn't want to lose that timing. Yeah.
I think, so one of the most empowering conversations I had this year when I was still kind of hemming and hawing about whether, so I had to make the tough choice between running for re-election or running for mayor. I could have run for both, but it would have, I didn't want to do that because it would have felt like I was sending a message that I'm hedging my bets and I wanted to be all in if I was running for mayor. And I have a friend and a mentor who was a mayor for 8 years in her community, and she's the one who helped me kind of make that leap. But one of the things in that conversation, and I've had this conversation with a few other women, particularly women of color, that we hear the statistic a lot about having to be asked several times, but I think that what Jamie said also really resonates, that desire was there and people weren't necessarily asking someone like me to run. And hearing her, she's also Asian American, and she said nobody was asking Lisa to run. Lisa told Lisa to run, you know, and nobody necessarily believed she could do it, but she had that drive. And hearing kind of that affirmed for me was really huge, that it's okay to want this too, that it's not just about, oh, fine, I'll do it because you asked me 12 times, but that it's actually okay to have that ambition and that drive to really make change in your community.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever really wanted to run for office before. It was more like I wanted to affect change and I wanted to see change happen. And I tried to be a part of or help with the change that should be happening, and it just wasn't. So in that, when people started saying, you should run for office, because I'm always up at the mic during public comment and I'm always saying something or I'm always giving ideas, they're like, why don't you just do it? And it was a while that I was like, I kind of don't want to do it. You know, I just wanted them to do their job. And that just, it didn't happen that way. It didn't work out that way.
And then finally, you decided you do their job?
Yeah, sometimes you have to be the one to make the change. And it got to that point.
Yeah. Well, so the flip side of that is that, like my organizations are really focused on building support and access for women who come outside the traditional avenues for seeking public office. And there can often be pushback or gatekeeping from kind of the traditional political establishment. Have you encountered any of that?
Just a little bit. So in my race, I was challenging a 27-year incumbent for the District 3 City Council seat. So not only had she's in the position right now until the end of the year. So not only had she held the position, Councilmember Blackwell, for 27 years, her husband held the position before her for like 18 years or something, right? And so I was going against, what was considered or is considered a political dynasty. So absolutely, I faced a lot of opposition. A lot of folks didn't take the campaign seriously, and it impacts running against an incumbent in Philadelphia impacts your ability to raise money. It impacts your ability to have staff and consultants, right? Because everybody is scared. They're scared of the political risk that comes from not just supporting you, but being seen with you in a picture or something, right? So it's kind of crazy. And so what we had to do was build a lot of our own grassroots support and, engage a lot with voters directly. And I think that was a strength of our campaign. We weren't able to get support from the establishment, the wards and the insiders, but the establishment didn't have a sense of how much the actual people wanted change, and they also grossly underestimated our ability to get out there and campaign. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So also, just a little bit, as soon as we put in our petition, so I ran on a slate of 3, and as soon as we submitted our petition, we were hit with a lawsuit from the sitting mayor. Just alleging that we falsified signatures, we misled voters into signing our petition, and there was a lot of, just false information going around about how we submitted our petition. So I there is a political establishment in town, and in Willingboro, especially in small towns, a lot of times you need to be like anointed to run for office. Like, all right, you sat on the Democratic committee, and then you went for school board, and now you can run for council. And we didn't go through that process, and we were actively excluded from that process because we wanted to sit on the Democratic committee, and they, situated the ballot so that we were in column 5 at the time. There was no one in 2, 3, and 4, and there were only candidates in column 1. So if you weren't specifically looking for us, you would have completely missed it. So there wasn't even that opportunity for us to work our way into the system and start to get our footing. So we just kind of had to take it by storm. So that pushback was surprising, and also experiencing that people don't want to associate with you. Like, you kind of become a leper almost. People are like, no, I'm okay, no pictures. So that part was strange. People who may have verbally said that they support you wouldn't or didn't actually support you, or wouldn't outwardly support you.
So how did you marshal support then from the outside?
A lot of engagement. We went into it with a very firm plan of how we were going to campaign, and it helped us because we had a campaign manager, and we set this up with the campaign manager, and then the day we launched our campaign, or the day before we launched our campaign, she decided it was too much and she didn't want to do it anymore. So we lost our campaign manager the day before we launched our campaign, and it was up to the 3 of us to orchestrate the whole thing because we didn't have any funds to hire anyone, and we had to build our team. So we just relied on personal relationships. My classmates at Penn basically paid for our door tags that we put out. There was an email sent out, and we got donations, and I'm like, yeah, we got the money, we can do these door tags. So it was step by step, baby steps, to talk to people, introduce ourselves to people, listen to them and hear what their concerns are, and then give just some of our ideas on how we can address those concerns together. And I think once people saw that we were genuine, they started to buy into our campaign.
No, I purposely, because I didn't necessarily experience any of this explicitly, and I think you guys, did a little more so. But what I was going to say is, I now have 2 campaigns under my belt: a successful city council run and I don't know how to characterize my mayoral run. I am very proud of it. I didn't make it through the preliminary, and in the council run, when I ran in 2017, voters were like energized and activated, and I represented a lot of things that people might want to see change more broadly in our nation, really, right? And also it was safe. It's very easy to look at that campaign with rosy-colored glasses. Now that I've been in my seat for a while, it wasn't by any means easy, but I think, I was running for an at-large seat, so I was asking for people 1 of 4 votes, and that's such a relatively different ask, right, than asking to be the executive leader of the city. Mm-hmm. And so, people came out to volunteer. People vocally supported me. I had a lot of those things. It wasn't easy, and I don't remember if I don't think I experienced like gatekeeping per se. In this race, I dealt with a lot of where the political establishment was sending their support, and the fact that I was in a very lopsided situation where the front runner, the person who's most likely going to make it through to the general election, was a state representative with funds that he was able to transfer from his recent reelection into a mayoral campaign, which he played, it's all by the rules, but ultimately like a funding mismatch. And even though people weren't per se explicitly backing him in his mayoral race. They knew he was probably going to do this back in November when he ran for re-election. And this is, again, I just endorsed him like today. So this is not so much a knock on him, but it's like this system that I was, that was very challenging to deal with. But the other thing is people being nice and not wanting to explicitly, they would be like, yeah, I think we'll vote for you, but I can't tell anyone, and that I think was a real, ended up being a real impediment because it's just this whole like idea of playing nice and where are people willing to spend their political capital and maybe risk some of their relationships for the vision of what they really want to see in their community versus like maintaining the status quo.
From my perspective, even though I was running as a Democrat outside of the party, I was still able to build a significant amount of support. So for one, my personal and professional network was pretty big by that time. I had run 2 nonprofits. I was pretty active in my community. I used to be the president of my neighborhood civic association. My kids went to school in West Philly. So I had a lot of people to tap into, and I tapped into them a lot. Also, because my opponent hadn't been challenged for 20 years, right? And so I think that made it a much more exciting.
A little rusty.
But I think also that made it a much more exciting race for the district, right? So people were really into it, right? And so I got a lot of support from folks who had, been in the district for a long time. I mean, if you had been there for, say you moved to the district 15 years ago, you might not necessarily have the same attachment, right? And so I built up a lot of support among people who were really excited to see that somebody had jumped into the race. Additionally, a pretty contentious, so my campaign, we raised quite a lot of money. We raised $250,000 ourselves, right? Wow. Additionally, a pretty contentious part of my race was that I was supported by an independent expenditure group pretty heavily. And that, it turned some people off, but it was also a political calculation because in Philadelphia, it's almost impossible to unseat an incumbent. Not having that support of the party means that you have to build coalitions of support in other places. From like a volunteer perspective, we had lots of folks who were pretty jazzed about the campaign. They wanted to jump in and they wanted to help us. And voters, even in the areas that were the base for my opponent, they really wanted to talk to us. And I had the same experience of people saying that they wanted to support me, but they didn't want anybody to know. Right. Yeah. Even on the day of the primary, I had particularly a lot of the older voters, they would come up to me at the polls and they would kind of whisper, like, I got you. But they didn't want any of their neighbors to know that, right? And I still get that now from people. They come and whisper to me that they were on my side and they supported me. So yeah.
We get a lot of that after the fact. Like people who wouldn't even speak to us before are like, I voted for you, right? And it's like, okay. Sure you did.
Right. Yeah. So coming back to like your planning background, when you're out on the campaign trail, you're talking to all these people who don't necessarily, aren't necessarily in the planning field. How do you boil down what it means to have this background for them, as a voter?
I always talk about it as, all of my career experiences, I see them as having been about helping Philadelphians to build the communities that they want to live in, right? And I also see being a district council person because you have, for better or for worse, because district council people have such a large amount of control over land use and zoning and the disposition of public land, you very much can bring those skills to bear, right? Engaging residents around the communities that they want to build and shape. And so that's how I would talk about it with folks. And I felt that resonated with them.
I think for me, it was, I'm thinking a lot in individual conversations or like house parties and those types of conversations versus like what I would say in a stump speech. It was a combination of talking about how being a planner, an effective planner, involves a lot of public process and community engagement, and why I really value that, and why I've seen better outcomes as a result of good community engagement. But I would also, people would ask about something like, don't we need more parking downtown? And I wouldn't tell them what they wanted to hear. But I would sort of be able to break it down, and then people were able to see sort of the complexity and oh, okay, this is a little more complicated. And I think that's how I was able to bring planning into conversations on local issues.
For me, it just kind of went together. In Willingboro, it's a Levittown, so it's a planned community, and planning is very heavily ingrained into the community itself. So our master plan is grossly out of date, 22 years out of date. So it was time, and that's an issue that was on the forefront of a lot of voters' minds, that our master plan is so out of date and it's time for redevelopment. But there was no one with a planning background on the council or knew anything about planning. So we're relying on professional services that may just create a plan that doesn't serve or reflect the needs of the residents. So it was really easy to just say, hey, I have this background and we can get this thing done. Not revisiting of the master plan that's 22 years old and just saying, we'll do a full process eventually. We can actually get this full planning process done. So it was pretty easy to...
Sounds like they're really lucky to have you.
Yeah.
All right, so you've all been elected to office. If you could have one piece of legislation, some dream legislation that would people remembered you for, what would you want it to be?
So almost my entire platform or agenda is focused on having more equitable and inclusive development. So in the 3rd district, we have most of the city's eds and meds within the boundaries of the district, which makes it a vibrant place and an economic engine, but also attracts a lot of development that is displacing folks and changing neighborhoods. And so my agenda is about how to do that in a more equitable way. So if I could change anything, I would love to have seen a stronger, and I know this was a huge fight in Philadelphia, but I would love to have seen a stronger inclusionary zoning ordinance. Here, what folks want to build is very high-priced apartments and condos. I would love to have the ability to push for more affordability within our neighborhoods. I also am really interested in ways that we can use shared equity models of home ownership and rental housing. So I'd love to see if that's something that we could do in the 3rd district.
That's cool.
So this isn't legislation per se, but what I would love to see, and one of the things, so this is where I struggled, right? As a planner, and in terms of my mayoral platform, it's campaign promises aren't my thing. Every issue has complexity, and so I think I got asked this question, what's your dream legislation? And in an endorsement interview once, I still got the endorsement, thankfully, but it's for me, it's more about the way we're going about our business, because there's tons of policy actions we need to take. But one of the things I would love to see is having a better framework for decision making, one that isn't just about the short-term bottom line of balancing our budget, but one that includes the long-term financial planning, that includes also thinking about climate and the environment, thinking about social equity, and thinking about public health outcomes as in every decision that a city undertakes, whether it's how we hire people for City Hall, whether it's how we make development decisions, a lot of things across the board.
I was going to say, process changes are some of the most systemic changes you can make, right?
For me, a lot of our platform was expect more. Expect more of yourself, expect more of your local government, and expect more for Willingboro. So in that expect more, one of the things that we've really been trying to encourage is voter education and voter mobilization. So when I think of like one piece of legislation, it would be automatic voter registration for the residents in town. A lot of the political establishment in New Jersey is focused on the voter rolls. So if you're not on the voter rolls, you're not getting the information about the candidates. You're not getting, that target to be able to actually learn who wants to represent you. And I think that's so important now, and has always been really important to be educated on who you're voting for and if they're going to actually serve your needs or if they align with the changes that you want to see. So that would be my dream legislation.
Nice. All right, I have one more question, and then we'll open it up for questions from the audience. Looking out, maybe somebody in this room would like to follow in your footsteps. Most of them are here, Penn, getting their degree in planning. What advice would you give them if they had aspired to do as you did and run for office?
Sure. My advice would be to have, craft a vision for yourself and then figure out what things you need to do, like what people do you need to know, what experiences do you have to have, and what do you need to communicate about yourself to fulfill that vision and to have other people see you that way. So what I mean is, I have been thinking about running for office for a long time, specifically in this district. And so I'm from here, I'm from the district, but when I moved back as an adult, the first thing I did was join my local civic, right? And I came to like the second meeting and they're like, hey, do you want to be the president? I'm like, sure, right? Right. But I knew that not only would I enjoy that, but that it would lead me and create the kind of relationships I wanted to have for what I wanted to do. I thought the same way about becoming a nonprofit ED. I focused on that, and then I created those experiences for myself, if that makes sense.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I think that all makes a lot of sense. I think coupled with that, though, sometimes a lot of us, I think this is an ongoing thing of this idea of imposter syndrome, and you absolutely should be building up your resume and your skills, but that also shouldn't be like your excuse for not doing it. I think one thing I really learned at Penn, I think the number one skill I learned here was networking, and I think not just because all those relationships will help you get to office, to elected office, but also because you need that support system, whether it's other people who've been like us, who have been through this, and who can provide a sounding board or connect you with someone who helped, us, or and then people within your community who can be your cheerleaders as well. I think that networking and building your support network is really important. And I guess I should take this opportunity to also do a plug for Emerge. Emerge was fantastic. I think it really, there are other programs as well. If you don't identify with, Emerge is a candidate training program for Democratic women, so that doesn't include everyone, right? But there are a lot of programs out there similar to Emerge that will help give you the tools of what are the best practices, what are the things that that win elections. It'll help you with that decision making of everybody in your community saying, oh, you need 100 yard signs, and Emerge will tell you, no, you need to go knock on 1,000 doors. And having that sort of reminder of here are the strategies that actually really work to win elections is really important, but through that you also build that network that I was talking about.
Yeah. I would say two things. One, develop a thick skin, because it is not easy. It's just a lot of things that come at you that you probably didn't expect would come at you. And it can catch you off guard and really kind of break your spirit if you're not prepared for people to take attacks at you. So develop that thick skin, and also really learn how to listen. And I know we say, oh yeah, I'm great at listening, but it's learning how to listen and then respond without necessarily discounting someone's perspective. There may be something small that in the grand scheme of things that is really important and really makes a difference for this one person, this one voter. And if you just say, oh yeah, that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, you're kind of shooting yourself in the foot. So just learning how to listen and take in people's feedback and people's issues and figure out ways to address them in the whole scheme, in the larger scheme, because you're not just advocating for your own agenda, you're a public servant. You're there to serve the people. And no matter how small their issues are, the next time they go to the ballot box, it will be based on what you did for them. So you just have to kind of keep that in mind.
Can I add one quick thing?
Yes.
One more quick thing that I forgot to say. Try to find ways to allow yourself to get comfortable with risk taking, right? So every opportunity that I've thought about and wanted to pursue had some level of risk. And as you're thinking about these opportunities, most people are going to advise you based on their own comfort level. So you'll get a lot of people who tell you, no, don't leave your current job, or why would you do something that's so crazy, right? But as you begin to take on bigger experiences, and as you put yourself in positions where you have to make decisions and have to take, certain levels of calculated and acceptable risk, it's a muscle that you build, right, over time.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
That's very cool. All right, let's take some questions from the audience. Please stand up if you do have something you would like. Yeah.
Just curious, but for some quick context, can you kind of give us an idea of how large your voter base is, or how many people you represent?
The 3rd district has about roughly 160,000 people.
So Melrose, Massachusetts is a population of 28,000. There are 20,000 registered voters, but municipal voter turnout is higher than many places, but it's usually under 50%. So targeting sort of like 8,000 voters.
Willingboro, New Jersey is a population of about 32,000 residents, but 22,000 registered voters. But typically, it only turns out about 16,000 voters.
That's good. 23,000 people voted in my race. I mean, out of, a good amount of, over 100,000 registered voters.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Sorry. Thank you guys for sharing everything. So my mom is actually running for office right now, state senate in North Carolina. This is her first time running. So I told her about this. She was really excited, so I'm asking a question on her behalf. She wanted to know kind of what was the best strategies that you found that transcended age groups and technology to get your platform across to voters.
So we took a go to where the people are type approach. So we were and because it was 3 of us, we were able to cover more ground. So even if there were events going on the same day, there was someone at everything. We knocked on every door in the community. We put up yard signs. We had our own events that weren't typical political events. We didn't want to just do a meet the candidates mixer, so we did like a workout class to target fitness people. We did a spa day type thing to target women. We did a thing at the VFW to talk to the veterans. So we just tried to mix it up and shake up how it was done typically in the community. So that's really worked well for us.
I was going to say pretty much the same thing, like going to events in the community. Our community has block parties, but the thing that first came to mind was also house parties. Like if you have supporters that can invite people in their network as well as maybe their immediate neighbors, which hopefully gets a cross-section of people. The benefit there is then hopefully you're also getting a mix of age ranges ideally in that mix of people, though it's people who know people, right? So
I would say door knocking for sure. If we're picking one that transcends, all different types of people, and door knocking as the candidate, right? So not just having a team, but going out yourself. I door knocked from February, the beginning of February till just before the primary, May 21st. And people are more impressed than they actually should be. That you you showed up at their door and you asked them for their vote and you want to engage with them about what they want to see in their communities. It was such an effective thing that I'm thinking about how to build that into just the way we
Right.
do things and
Just
interface
showing up
with
at
the
people's houses at dinner
community.
time.
Yeah.
All right, as someone who has knocked doors only as a volunteer, how many doors do you have to knock on before you're no longer scared of knocking on a door?
I would say you start to get more comfortable with it like the first day of being out there
my
for
gosh.
several hours.
I've never
When you
gotten
realize that people are not going to scream at most people, some people are mean, but most people are pretty happy that you showed up. Yeah.
For me, you never know. It was because you never know what you're going to get. You knock on a door and you don't know who's going to answer. You don't know what they're going to say or how they're going to receive you. So you could be super comfortable and confident, and then they're like, no, there's no way I'm voting for you. And you're like, okay, thanks for your time. But yeah, it was never something that I'm like, yeah, I got this one type deal.
I liked it more than the calling for dollars.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So.
I think for me it was I think I'm probably more like I think once I get started I like doing it, but I'm like, and I think when I was really just driven by, you know, particularly in my own campaign, because it is a little like if you're driven by the outcome, like you sort of just get over it because you know it's like the necessary means to an end. But while I'm doing it, I enjoy it. So it's like this weird, like, I don't know that I've ever gotten not scared of it, but like I also know that there's like the heart and mind part that I'm like, it's fine. It almost always turns out.
Yeah.
All right, we'll take two more questions. Oh, I'm sorry. Yep, go ahead.
So, I don't come from a planning background. I teach in historic preservation here, and one of the things I'm hoping maybe you can address is how you reach out to people using the kinds of skills you have in an environment like a school of design and make it clear that getting involved in politics or advocacy isn't somehow a violation of the code of professionalism. Because this is a real problem I think in my program, where there is a strong sense that if you speak up about what you believe, you've talked yourself out of a job.
Oh no.
I'm gonna jump out on that one. I think there's a balance. Like we said before, there's always that fear of political alignment. So if I support this person, then these people aren't going to like me, or, you know. So there's always that fear, but it's really about being confident in what you believe in and knowing that it's a necessary thing, especially in something like historic preservation. Like, that political arm is so strong, you know, it really can determine the way that it's going to go. So it's necessary to get involved, and your voice is needed at that table. If you just opt out, you're missing a whole another way that you can affect change.
Do you mean involvement in politics or involvement in policy? Or do you see that as both?
I mean both.
Because I can't see where, I think it'd be a good thing, right, to have the folks who are here thinking about planning and thinking about how that affects our city to be involved in policy making. And that should be something that, you know, would be not contentious. I could see where folks would get nervous about getting involved in campaigns, right? I'm not sure. I'm not sure how to get folks more comfortable
For me,
with
so this question really resonates with me. And it's probably part of the reason why I'm up here and not working in a different environment in certain ways, where I felt like there were a few moments where I butted up against kind of this tension. One was I was, facilitating a conversation among kind of like the Boston Metro planning directors, and I was just trying to get us to do a work plan for the next year. And I don't remember what I said. all I remember is the reaction I got from this one planning director from one of our suburban communities where he said, Manisha, you don't get it. We're not the movers and shakers in our community. And to me, that was just like, yeah, you are. Like, as planners, you may not be the final decision maker, but you have the opportunity to really shift that decision. And we need, that's what you're there for. I didn't have this argument with him in that moment, but it was just like and I don't even think he fully meant it the way I took it, but it was just like, no, we are the movers and shakers, and we need to be making some of those decisions. Another piece of like that motivation was seeing just the lack of representation that was happening when I'd go to board and commission meetings and seeing kind of like this very homogenous group of typically white men, right, making all the decisions for a community, and then having conversations in my office among my colleagues about equity and systemic injustices and racism and homophobia and the history of our communities and all these like really thorny conversations, and feeling like there was such a mismatch there. And I think one of the things that I've really been reflecting on is like, why are more planners running for office? And I think there's something to, like, I had this theory, this hunch that it might be more particularly women and planners of color that are running for office, is the fact that we feel this sense of urgency in making change in our communities. But one of the things that I would love to see us do is like start rethinking about, what does politics mean? Politics doesn't have to be this dirty word. And you can make a sort of a more objective decision without it being like partisan or whatever. People kind of have this made up sort of idea of like politics being really dirty. It doesn't have to be. That's my soapbox.
I mean, I'm on that soapbox with you, right? Government is the embodiment of the collective decisions we make, right? And if we opt to not participate in the process, then our decisions are not reflected. All right, got one more question. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Two more.
This comes sort of as a follow-up to that, but how do you, when talking to someone who says like, oh, I'm not, I don't get into politics, I just do my own thing, and like, they may have opinions about what's going on in their neighborhood or community, but they don't feel it's their place to get involved, or they don't want to get involved for a number of reasons. What are some tactics you use to draw those people in, make them feel that their input is valued and they should have a say in what goes on in the community?
Sure. I've done a lot of work focused on community engagement, right? And so I've seen the power of like park friends groups and friends of school groups and civic associations at not only engaging people in a very concrete way, but I also see those groups as an avenue for bigger ways of making change, whether it's in a neighborhood or whether it's in a city. So I always encourage folks that want to have more of an impact where they live to plug in that way, right? I find that that's something that's very like doable and achievable for people, and allows them to see that they can make an impact in very concrete ways that can grow over time.
I think there's a combination of what's your entry point sometimes, and is there anything relevant happening in your own community that makes you feel like you would want to get involved. And so I think sometimes it's flipping that question back on us as the policymakers, I guess, to say, are we doing things that are relevant for our population? But the other thing I would do in those sort of one-on-one conversations is really sort of break it down to the nuts and bolts of like, what is it that you care about in this community, or what are you frustrated by, and what's the sort of public policy or public representation angle of that.
Yeah, I would echo that. It's about helping people draw the connections, because I did run into people who would say, oh, I'm not big into politics, I'm just tired of this pothole. And it's like, yeah, I understand that, but that the people who are in charge of fixing that pothole are the people that you elect. So if that's something that you care about, you need to say that to the people in politics so that they can make the change that you want to see.
Thank you. We'll do one more.
Thanks. I had a question, kind of thinking about the people who are behind all of your campaigns and now especially in office. So obviously the role of the candidate as kind of the face of the campaign and kind of the narrative communicator is really important. But there's also a lot of like campaign managers and policy directors, and especially I'm sure in a big city like Philadelphia, a whole range of staff that sit behind you, or maybe not. But I'm curious about some of the skills and roles that are associated with being in office that kind of transcend being the candidate. What kind of things to look for there and what we should be thinking about.
I'll let you guys go.
One of the things that I see is, I would say, lacking in that just the arena as a whole is project management skills. And if you go to a lot of these boards and commissions, they have the same conversations over and over, and there's no progress on the issue or the initiative that they're trying to put forth. So there needs to be someone that's like, okay, this is what we want to do. This is the steps that we're going to take to get this thing done. But if no one has that voice or that mindset in the room, I always say I feel like I'm in Groundhog Day, because I go to the same meetings and they're having the same exact conversation over and over and over, and nothing is changing and nothing is getting done. So
I would say, and we were a pretty scrappy campaign. I had 3 staff, and then at one point we had a field team that we were paying, and we had volunteers. In terms of finding my staff, it was hard in the beginning because locally folks did not want to take the risk of working on my campaign. And then even when I would talk, I learned all about this world, right? There are these smart young folks that go all over and do campaigns. And when I would talk to a lot of them, they'd be like, you're running against a 27-year incumbent? Oh, okay, And I could tell they weren't going to take that job. But I winded up getting, some really good staff, and they were highly organized. They were really strategic. And they kept me on track. And they also were able to see a lot of political opportunity that we could jump on and take advantage of when we needed to. And so, yeah, young, smart, strategic.
one more thing I would add, it's just like a diversity of skills, because in our campaign, really our campaign team was the 3 candidates. So we didn't have a team behind us, but what really helped us is the diversity in our skills. I'm a planner. One of my running mates is a combat veteran and organizational leadership teacher and professor, and the third one is a chemist. So all of those 3 things kind of put together in our different ways of thinking helped us to look at all the problems and situations that we were in from different perspectives and come up with a plan that we could move forward.
When I was meeting with my cabinet, which included paid staff and volunteers, we did this team roles assessment to really find out what are the sort of roles we're each playing, or that we typically would play on a team to help us identify where we might have gaps. And one of the things was my campaign manager and I are both sort of big thinkers, and we need somebody who's really task driven and can help us get things done. But I think the other thing just generally that I would add is just resourcefulness, because campaigns are highly unpredictable. You have a plan, you absolutely need to have a campaign plan, and the project management skills makes a lot of sense, and I'd say that's true of being in office as well. But the resourcefulness of I don't know how to solve this problem, and then you call people up and it's oh, I just made it up too. So basically there's some best practices, but not a real playbook for your campaign. And people who can kind of go a little bit outside the box and be creative and try things is really important too.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Ladies, it is such an honor to be on this stage with you. I am so in awe of you putting yourselves out there and running hard, and congratulations to your offices and future office holders. I hope you all stick around, come up, ask these ladies some questions if you are interested in considering joining the candidate training program, come please talk to me about Emerge. We have some snacks in the back. Please join me in thanking all of our candidates.